Okay. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about mental skills development and practice during a down season. Typically, as athletes run a lot of miles through the spring, summer, and fall, there's usually a really great opportunity to take a down season. And we'll go through what that means and how it's different from an off season. But this is a really great opportunity to fine tune your core values, your goals, and the mental skills that that we need and can practice and sharpen to achieve goals and stay in alignment with our values. So here we go. Basically, we talk about this slide all the time. So mental skills training, it refers to the deliberate practice of psychological techniques that help athletes enhance their performance, maintain focus, manage stress, and recover from setbacks. So like physical strength training and run training, mental skills training strengthens your mind, but also like run training and strength training, consistency is best. So using tools like goal setting, visualization, self-talk, and relaxation techniques. We'll go through a couple exercises using those towards the end, but just wanted to give like a quick overview again of what mental skills training is. So this is also really important. Why does it matter? In endurance sports like running, marathon running, ultra running, 5K, whatever kind of running you're doing, where races often last for multiple hours, the mind plays a crucial role in sustaining your effort. And so it's really easy to lose focus during the long miles, which is why mental skills are really essential. There's also a lot of research that has been done with athletes who regularly practice mental skills, feeling more in control, more resilient, more confident going into races, but then also coming out of races and being able to really tap into that fatigue resistance that we talk a little bit about, but not as much physically as mentally, which is really cool. So I guess like an example of this would be like, if you imagine you're 70 miles into a 100-mile race, right? Everything hurts and you're dying. At this point, it's no longer about physical conditioning, but your ability to like push through mentally, because like at this point there's nothing you can do physically that will, besides continuing to move forward, that will get you to the finish line, besides just your grit, determination, will, your why, your values, all of these things. So mental skills training tools like positive self-talk, visualization of the finish line can actually be the difference between DNFing and finishing the race. Also, if you guys have questions, since I can't see the chat on my screen, just shout them out, if it makes sense. Okay. So another important reason why mental skills training is so important is so cool, I guess, is that it offers recovery from everything that you've been doing without the pressure of performance. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in a second, but during the down season, you're not facing the immediate pressure of competition, right? So you actually can fully focus on building that mental resilience and figuring out what works for you, what doesn't work for you. The same way we do with nutrition, we can also do with mental skills. So we can reset physically and mentally, gives you space to identify what your weaknesses are and work on them in a more low stakes environment. And then developing mental habits without physical fatigue is really great, because since you're not training as intensely, you've got a little bit more bandwidth to invest in your mental skills training. So because your mind can handle more when it's not dealing with the physical stress and fatigue of training, this actually makes the down season ideal for practicing skills without being clouded by exhaustion or figuring out when the last time you had a snack was, or just feeling like mentally foggy as well as physically exhausted. So I wanted to provide a couple options here of examples that elite athletes use to sort of how they use mental skills training to gain a competitive edge. And I guess here is like, there's a lot of mental rehearsal and visualization that happens. So elite athletes use visualization and mental rehearsal as tools. So in the pre-race emails and in a lot of these calls, we talk about mentally simulating race day scenarios. So like what happens during that day from the time your alarm goes off to the time you hit the finish line. Just breaking it all down, thinking about best case scenarios, thinking about worst case scenarios, and how you're going to problem solve and get through them. What are you going to tell yourself when shit hits the fan? How are we going to navigate like a bonk, a sprained ankle, pain caves? Like how are we gonna get through that? So an example of this is like marathon runners like you, like Kipchoge, visualizes each stage of his race, from the start gun to the finish line, and again visualizes everything going really well, but also the anticipated challenges of fatigue, bad weather, stomach upset, whatever. And so by rehearsing these situations, he can show up and he already knows what he's going to do. Like if the worst case scenario happens, he's got a backup plan, and he's got a backup plan for that backup plan. So another way to do this is to they stay present and focused. So you can use mindfulness training as another tool. This just sharpens your focus, keeps you present. A lot of times we hear people talk about running the mile you're in, or running from aid station to aid station, using landmarks, all totally fit under this little umbrella. So for runners like Courtney Dauwalter, she often practices mindfulness over the course of a long run, right? So she's doing 100-milers every other month. I don't know. But she's present in the moment, and she's curious about that moment rather than worrying about how much further she has to go to the next aid station, or rather than looking at the race as this big 100-mile thing. She's able to break it down into chunks, especially in situations where you're running through the night or you're really tired towards the end of the race. Just being able to stay focused and present is a really great way that mental skills training can help us all gain that competitive edge. Another example is self-talk. We've talked about this a lot. Self-talk and self-compassion kind of go hand in hand. Where like a lot of times I will ask myself if, like if Caitlin came to me and said, I'm really struggling with X, Y, and Z, I would think like, well, this is what I would tell her. But being able to turn that back and tell myself that is also incredibly helpful. So being able to like empower yourself with self-talk, and, like the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves are so important. And these can actually really help us stay motivated and push through not just races, but hard workouts, long runs, tough days at the office. Like it can apply to everything. So during the off season, we might work on creating like a self-talk script that you can use when things get tough in a race. And again, can apply to work, relationships, family, traffic, I don't know, all the life stressors. So what do we say? What do we need to hear in order to keep moving forward? Sometimes that's like, run the mile you're in, one step, 1 mile at a time, keep moving forward. I know there are a lot of pro runners, like the one that I'm thinking of specifically right now is Amanda Basham. She literally has relentless forward progress tattooed on her body because that's what she tells herself to get through these moments, which is pretty cool. And the fourth example here is building confidence through goal setting. So one thing that I've said this to a lot of athletes, but confidence needs evidence. So in order to build confidence, you kind of have to show yourself that you're capable of doing it. And the only way to do that is through consistent training, goal setting, self-talk, like achieving previous goals. So using the off seasons to reflect on long-term goals and then break them down into smaller manageable steps, like a process goal, is helpful to build this confidence and sense of purpose with training. So during a down season, we can spend a lot of time reflecting on what went right, what went wrong, how to fix what went wrong and problem solve there, but then also how to apply the things that we've learned to our future goals. And we can look at it from like an wow, words are hard, an outcome goal perspective, and then break that down into smaller process goals. So Ren, like the example here, I would say like Ren might set a goal to improve her pacing strategy over the down season or off season. So we would create a specific training plan and mental drills to work on pacing. So that might look like if someone's running like an 8-minute mile and you want to be running a 7:30, we can measure progress along the way. And then without plateauing, we can sort of like change the stimuli and figure out what we need to do to get you to run faster, whether it's more intensity and less volume, maybe it's less intensity and more volume, just is going to depend on the athlete. But setting the goals is kind of like how we stick to the goals. Okay. This, I guess before we get into this, I think like the TLDR of like the down season is that it just like offers athletes a really good opportunity to develop mental toughness because it provides a mental space to focus without distraction of actual races. So elite athletes leverage mental skills training like mindfulness, self-talk, what we just talked about in goal setting, to stay sharp, like you can gain a mental edge, sure, but you're definitely going to come back to the next season stronger than you were before because of everything that you've learned, reflected on, and are like dedicated to improving. So that's a really cool thing about mental skills. And then when we start talking about the down season versus the off season, this is where things get really interesting. So the difference between an off season and a down season in terms of recovery and burnout and prevention. During an off season, traditionally, this is seen where athletes take a complete break from training. Like they are not running, they're over it, right? And like this is what we try to avoid by finding that balance of stress and training throughout your logs and throughout a season. So this is when like stress is stress is stress is stress is stress is stress. It's like so important. So we never want to get to the point where you feel like you have to completely stop running. When you do take an off season, it usually lacks structure and more or less like structure needed to address mental recovery proactively. So you might disengage completely, which could actually lead to a drop in motivation later or a loss of focus when and or if you do return to training. So with a down season, this is more strategic. It's less physical intensity. Recovery is prioritized. Fueling is prioritized. We're not stepping away from training. We're just dialing it back a little bit. This is also a really great time to work on strength training and using strength training through apps like Which Weight, or if you have your own strength coach, to almost use as like an insurance policy to not get injured for the upcoming season. So the focus here for a down season, active recovery. So we're going to recharge without losing momentum. An example of this, I guess, would be instead of completely stopping all training, we would like reduce mileage, add in more cross training, strength training, and then shift focus to lower intensity activities like swimming, cross training, skiing for a lot of athletes. Mostly a lot of athletes in Colorado get like really into skiing during the winter, which is great because you're using different muscles, you're building in like a new kind of aerobic base, but it's all fitness. So, it's not as jarring as like the consistent pounding that running can be, but it's also a fun way to break up the activities. So it's not going to be as boring. It's just like slogging miles on a paved road in the middle of the winter. So second part of this is focusing on weakness without the performance pressure, like I mentioned before. In an off season, athletes might completely disconnect from physical and mental training. And this could be good for a mental break if you really, really, really need it. But kind of like misses our chance to build those critical mental skills that can actually enhance performance later. So with a down season, we can identify the weaknesses and spend time working on them in a lower stakes setting. An example of this could be if an athlete uses a down season to practice mental imagery techniques, like you could be visualizing yourself navigating tough sections of your A race for 2025. And this isn't only going to help sharpen your focus, but it's actually going to help boost your confidence because again, you're seeing yourself doing it enough times that when the opportunity arises, you've put yourself in the best situation to actually succeed. And then psychological recovery and physical recovery, these things work together so well. And we talk a lot about this with sleep as well. Like sleep is a really great way to enhance psychological recovery and also physical recovery during an off season. Off seasons, I would say here, you know, they're more heavily focused on physical recovery, but an off season without intentional psychological recovery can kind of leave you feeling, again, less motivated, a little bit unprepared, sluggish when you do start getting back into training. Like you're not as inspired, you're not as excited, which makes the training more difficult, right? And so if we take a down season instead and we're doing less mileage, more cross training, strength training, just lower volume overall, you can take more time to reflect on the past season, mentally regroup a bit, work on different techniques and mental skills training that you think would work best for you moving forward. And then practice again, low pressure setting. Like we can practice this in the pool if you're swimming laps, on the elliptical if you're skiing. There's a lot, like I think skiing is a really good way, for me at least, to practice positive self-talk, and just kind of like get myself to a place where like I can go down a black diamond and not be absolutely convinced I'm going to tear an ACL, right? So the I think that this is really helpful in that way. But I think overall, the down season here is just, it's a more structured, strategic, intentional break that focuses on recovery without fully disengaging. So you can still you still get the benefits of active rest, but you're going to stay mentally sharp without that added pressure of like a race or having to hit like a specific time goal or a specific distance goal. Okay. Couple of exercises here. This one I think will be really fun and I'm going to do it with you. So if you have a paper and pen, now would be the time to grab one. Yeah, so just give me a thumbs up when you're ready. I'm gonna do this too because this one's really fun. And this is a really good one to do fairly often or keep one on hand somewhere that you can see it so that you can keep making adjustments to it. Also, sorry, I feel like my ear needs to pop and I keep like, my voice sounds super nasally right now. So I apologize. Struggling on this Friday morning. Okay. This exercise is called the goal map. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to create a goal map. How that works is, so let's see. We are going to draw almost like a target. Let's see if I can move this. Goal map. Okay, target. So this first like inside goal here, this might look like, for me, I just signed up for the Tucson Marathon. I'm gonna try to run it as fast as I can. So I'm gonna put, oh God, I'm gonna put 2:35 in there. That's my goal. And that's like the tangible, big, scary goal. So inside, or that goes inside that middle circle. And then the next line is like the process goals. So what am I going to have to do? How am I going to have to break that down in order to get to that goal? And that can be 2, 3, 4 circles deep, right? Like what are the habits I'm going to need to establish in order to get to that goal? And then with that in mind, I think each process goal should have 2 to 3 actionable steps. So if I'm trying to run a fast marathon, one process goal for me is strength train twice a week. Okay, so that's going to go. Can you guys see this? Or is it blurry? Too
It's
blurry.
not so much blurry as
Back,
invisible.
just back
Oh,
it up a little bit.
wait.
I saw it for a second.
It's it's getting
Oh,
treated
wait,
as,
wait, wait.
there you go.
Oh,
Hold it in front of your body because otherwise it gets treated as part of the background more.
yeah,
There you
there
go.
you go.
Okay, so the circle there is the time that I scribbled over because it's scary to think about. And then the next one is strength, right? And so I'm going to do that 2 to 3 times a week. So I'm going to make a note of that. Nutrition is going to be another process goal that I work through, and that's just like carb heavy, protein heavy, making sure I'm eating enough always. And then maybe another process goal is physical therapy once a week. And this will all depend on kind of like what your goal is. So these will be different for each of you based off of that goal. But basically, with these process goals in mind, you can keep expanding out until until the page is full. And that just gives you an idea of what we need to do, what habits we need to establish when we're chasing these big goals. And one way to do this is to sort of reflect a little bit and ask yourself, one, why are we chasing this big goal? Is it a means to an end, or is it just like a means? And whatever the answer is to that is like, we can work with it, but this is where core values come into play. This is where like motivation comes into play. So I think if you are just getting into running and you're thinking, I want to run my first 5K, I want to run my first 10K, that's great. And we would start with like some walking and then walk, jog, and then jog, and then run. And then you might go from like a 10-minute mile to a 9-minute mile to an 8-minute mile, but that could take years, right? And there's a quote that says something along the lines of like, to climb any mountain, like basically says that you're going to be spending most of your time on the side of the mountain, not on the summit. So you need to really like the mountain that you're climbing. So we don't spend a lot of time crush and finish lines, standing on podiums, hitting time goals, whatever. Like the process of training and falling in love with the process of training is really that time spent on the side of the mountain. So, I guess with that said, I can share mine again, but does anyone feel comfortable, or one, does anyone have questions? And then two, does anyone want to share theirs?
I mean, I think for me, I'm not sure what the other layers would be, that's why I work with you.
Yeah.
So I think like, yeah, I'm not sure what the process goals would be at this point.
Okay. What's that? What's the center of your map?
Well, I honestly haven't thought about this much because, as you know, I got sick right after my race. But the only thing that I have thought about, which was because you reminded me of this, is a very, very lofty, who knows how long-term goal, but to do rim to rim to rim.
Yes. Love it. Okay. Cool. So we've got rim term in the middle. I'm gonna make this map with
I
you.
did put strength training because that's something that I want to do anyway. Like I've been thinking a lot about the down season and wanting to build up strength training since I didn't do as much in my training for this race. So like that was an obvious one. But then outside of that, I was like,
Yeah. Okay. So I think strength could definitely be one of those. And then even the next ring, we could focus on sleep quality, right? Aiming for hopefully 8 to 9 hours. I'm a big sleeper. I need like 9 or I turn into a monster.
Yeah.
So sleep quality is one, nutrition could be another. So we might either work with a nutritionist or create a nutrition log. So we start getting a better idea of how much you're eating, when you're eating, what you're eating. And then the next line of that, or like the next circle out, could be tracking your nutrition during training, whether you're biking or running or cross training, like just having an idea of how much you're taking in. Another layer of that, we could get really into the weeds here with sodium and fluid loss, right? That's really important too, because that's going to determine how you feel during hotter weather.
Yeah, I was thinking like heat training potentially, but time of year, I'm not sure. But yeah, for me, once I leave the mountains, I get scared.
I totally get that. Yeah, I think heat training would be another ring, and we could do that within like 4 to 6 weeks of your actual like planned time to do it, because the difference in temperature in the canyon is about 30 degrees from rim to river. So that's definitely something worth keeping in mind. I think physical therapy or maybe even body work could be one of those rings, whether it's once a week or once a month, just like setting aside that time, budgeting for those things to make sure that your body is in good condition and that you're taking care of yourself. Daily meditation could be one of those things, weekly or daily journaling. There's so many options to these rings that can really like bring us closer to our goal. So um I hope that helps. There's a lot of options here. And Caitlin, I would love to hear your thoughts too.
Yeah, and so this was kind of interesting because it was funny because when we starting out with the goal map, so first thing is like I'm still the thing that I have in the middle of my circle is doing my next 100K. I want to give that another go. Like when I did my 100K in February, I was like, I really like this distance, but I want to like get better at it. I want to do it more. But then like I got injured. And so I'm still kind of working through that. And it's been like 7 months. And like I know, like the last 2 weeks like have been challenging and like my IT band is starting to get like wonky again. So like when I'm thinking of this, so I started my circle and I kind of took like the things that over the last 7 months because like I consider myself to be pretty good at like the little things like prioritizing sleep, thinking about nutrition, thinking about strength, and sometimes I actually feel like I focus on too many of all the little things. And like, that's where I'm thinking about with this off season and the 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 down season is actually like maybe taking a little bit more pressure off of it, like you were saying. And so like when I was doing the circle, I actually like over the last few months, I've identified the things that actually really do impact me. And I think it's different for every person. But like, for example, the first thing I have that I know is one of the biggest things that I need to focus on for my training is nutrition. That's like my biggest thing. And then sleep. But to your point, like I'm pretty good about being like, I am going to be in bed for 9 hours. I don't care who tells me what, like, I don't care if my boyfriend's still up, I'm going to bed. So like those are things that I'm pretty good at and I think they are really beneficial. But then when I started getting further out, so like with the strength aspect, I've been trying to figure that out because like I'm trying to figure out what works for me because sometimes I do strength that actually irritates my imbalances more. So like for that, I kind of kept it very kind of broader, where I was like, keep figuring out strength. And then for the next one, I said, continue to be mindful of overall stress and not getting burned out. And then the last one I said is look at the calendar year as a whole, because something I do want to implement this winter is like this whole conversation has actually been really interesting to me, because like my previous training and coaching, like it was like, no, we train all year and like still doing big vert and mileage and stuff in the winter, which kind of, I think, burnt me out before my 100K, because I was just like, it's snowy, so I can't get to beautiful places
Mhm.
to get a lot of vert. So I was literally going up like 1,000-foot hill 10 times.
Oh my,
So like, I think I'm thinking a little bit softer, rather than putting like distinct, like, I need to strength train this many days.
yeah.
I need to do this much vert, or I need to do this much heat training, and kind of being like, I need to figure out what kind of heat training works for me. I need to figure out what kind of vert works for me, but also keeps me engaged in the process and not like mentally, I'm done.
Totally. And I think like this is such a good time to do it, because we can hold these things a little bit looser, right? Like we don't have to be as rigid with it. You don't have to hit a certain number of feet per mile throughout the course of a training week. You don't even have to hit a certain mileage if that's not what your goal is for. And this is where like individualized coaching is like so helpful, because I think for you, Caitlin, being able to again like hold those things a little more loosely and not be as focused about the number of carbs or the number of calories we're taking in per hour on a long run, but like finding out what do you like what do you get excited about, like what are you going to be grateful that you packed 25 miles into a 30-mile run. Like, is it Oreos? Is it pickles? Is it gummy bears? Like you know what I mean? Figuring that out. So it's like we're keeping future Caitlin in mind always, but without that added pressure of like needing to be perfect all of the time or having to nail it every time, because this is super low stakes. Like there's this period of time is super low stakes, and the purpose of it is to like mess up sometimes and not get it right, because we're learning from it, and we can apply it to the next thing. So if you get to mile 30 in a long run and you're like, wow, I really hate pickles, that is great information, like you're not going to reach for the pickles at an aid station, so like we don't need to practice with pickles. Like it seems so silly and so like simple, but it's not, it's the more information we have, the better decisions we can make.
I love that. I'm excited.
Excited too. And I think even in terms of figuring out strength training, like, yes, I think if it's less weight and more mobility or stability for your IT band specifically, we should figure that out. We have the time to do that. So let's take advantage of that time and like keep really close track of what aggravates it and what doesn't, and how often you're foam rolling and what and where you're foam rolling and how it affects the way your IT band feels. So yeah, this is so exciting, because I think a lot of people think of down seasons as a time to just like charge really hard and do all of the things, because we can't get to beautiful places on trails, and like it depends what your goals are, but at the same time, it's also a really good maintenance phase. Like we can take a step back, we can take care of ourselves, we can figure out what works, what doesn't work, and what we like enough to implement to our training. Because like everyone who's here enjoys the training. That's why we're here. That's why we do this thing. And because adaptations don't happen overnight, being able to take the time to figure out these little like unlocks into our personal training is really cool. And it's like, it's only going to benefit you. So it's not like, you know, it would be silly if someone ever thought like, oh yeah, I really found out that 60 carbs per hour is like works really well for me. Like no one's gonna be mad about that. Like it's a really good thing to learn, you know? So I think like this is the time to do it. And the more things we can learn during the down season, the better we can apply them to the next season or the next 100K goal. So I hope that makes sense.
It does. I like all that concept of like, so funny enough, that's like a quote for me is figuring it out. And it's just like, that's all we're doing, figuring it out.
Just figuring it out. Yep.
I have
Yep.
another thought just as we were talking about that and thinking about my own challenges. And I know Ren and I have been connecting a little bit on this as well, is like focusing in on our like chronic health issues. Like,
Mhm.
you know, I've been trying to navigate doctor's appointments and different things, but I probably could be prioritizing some of that a little bit more. Like I just saw my primary care doctor and this is Red, you might appreciate this. He was like, if you lived in Davis, you probably already have a diagnosis. And I was like, cool, that makes me feel really good right now. Can you send me to Davis? So I'm thinking like, hey, why haven't we pushed on this more? Like maybe because when I run, I feel better. And that's been kind of my focus and what's in my control. But maybe taking the time to like, no, you just like need to drill down on going to get answers and doctor's appointments and maybe traveling for them and stuff. So just something that kind of came to mind because if I'm thinking of something like training for another big goal, like I don't want to just go through it all again and survive on NSAIDs. Like I maybe getting answers first is a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's funny that you mentioned that because I have had exactly 5 conversations with athletes this week about how frustrating it is to make doctor's appointments now, whether you're like going in as a new patient and you get put on like a 3 or 4 month wait list, and then you go in and they tell you that they want you to journal and track all this stuff. And so you have to come back 3 months later and you don't actually get anything figured out. Whole other conversation, and like I get hot, like sweaty thinking about it because it makes me so mad. But that is definitely something that could be um could be considered. And then I think too, like the same way that I myself will set snack alarms throughout the day, like sometimes I have to live and die by my Google Calendar and say like, okay, on Monday at 9 a.m., I'm calling to make an appointment and I'm giving myself an hour to be on hold, you know, before I move on to my next task. And it's sometimes it's just like that repetitive, just doing the thing to get what you need. But
Yeah, right. Like I'm kind of thinking since it's down season, rather than like, oh, I better carve out that hour for a run, like maybe that hour is needs to be for appointments right now.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
like a little less time carved out for running. So I think that could be really a helpful mindset for me.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's where these goal maps they can get really detailed and really intricate, but they're also really good to have around because, you know, just like a reminder every day where you're like, oh, and it doesn't even necessarily matter where or like what level of the map that task is on. The fact that it's there means it's a priority, you know. But I think with that said, I would love to move on to this next exercise is called confidence bingo. And this is super fun. I've done this for myself and other athletes before. And basically, like the gist of it is like you're creating a confidence bingo card. So where each square has whether like it's a positive self-talk statement or an affirmation that you can use during your training. It's like, I am strong. I ran 30 miles this week. I've trained for this. Just the statements that you need to hear. You know, sometimes it's when in doubt, play Taylor Swift. Sometimes I think of my niece Ellie saying like, we never, ever, ever give up, and like screaming it at me as she's like chasing me around her house for 30 minutes because they won't let me leave to go for a run. And like, she just decides to do it with me. So things like that, like pulling on memories and motivation and people who inspire you, like they get their own space on the bingo card. And so you can use these in training, in races, and even like at the gym. You know, if you really don't want to go to a gym and you do, like that's a bingo card space. So it's just like a grid of all of the things you need to see and hear in order to feel like you're doing what you need to do. And as you tick through these, your confidence will build because confidence needs evidence. And this is the perfect example of that. Like it's a tangible piece of evidence that you can mark, you know, with a highlighter or check marks or stickers or whatever it is. Like it's something that you can see and feel and hold, but also reflect on when you're running or racing.
This is, I mean, I don't know if it's individual question, but what about like, I don't know if this is necessarily correct, but slow down. Like if you're getting overwhelmed and just the reminder of like when you're running or something like this is really hard, slow down. And but I don't know if that's kind of the opposite of giving confidence.
I think if you're able to reframe it in that like you're allowing yourself to slow down and thinking of it in more like you're zooming out a little bit more so it's more long term. So it's like, you know, we run slow to run fast. That's why easy days are easy and hard days are hard. So I think that yeah, that would definitely be a good slot on the card. Does anyone want to share any other slots that they might put on a bingo card? I think there should always be like a free space, obviously, because like we're human and like probably not going to get to them all, but it would be cool if we did. But the reality is like sometimes you just need, you know, like it's okay to not hit all of them. Or even get them all like in a row or blackout or whatever. I don't remember exactly the rules of bingo. Um, but it could be, you know, if you're thinking about it in terms of a week or a month, just consistently, you know, consistent strength training or 2 times the strength training this week, or I did mobility twice this week, or, you know, because it's sort of like when we go into races and we look back at our training logs to build confidence, like we're looking at the things that we've done and the things that we've achieved and overcome and learned throughout the training block in order to like, yeah, of course I deserve to stand on this start line. Like this is a version of that, but it's just more individualized. I'll give you a couple more minutes with that one. If anyone wants to share, that would be awesome too. I think these are always really fun because they are so individualized. Or like something that I put on here might, you know, like not work for someone else, or it might work for someone else and like spark a new idea or a new square.
I can share a few more of mine. I said I did scary things. I got out of my comfort zone and I did something where I had to release control.
Yes. Oh my God, that just gave me goosebumps. Yes. So good. Those are so good.
I have dark and cold did it anyway. My
Yes.
free spaces drank water.
That's drinking water is so important, but but the dark and cold did it anyway. Like, yes, especially as we like most of the time, like a down season happens over the winter. So it's dark and cold and we're doing it anyway, which I love. Yeah. Perfect.
One that I've used for a while, and I'm trying to shorten it, but nothing compares, everything is easy. And that's comparing to another experience in my life, and I use that often, that like
Yes.
nothing as hard as that, so this is easy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I think one for me that I would use is like post I would probably say something like post it and shut down, which is like the run uploads to Strava and I immediately get off Strava. Like I'm not gonna doom scroll. I'm not gonna compare. I'm just it's there and that's it. Like just in and out. Okay, so for this next exercise, it's called the distraction traction. Basically, what's going to happen here is I am going to set a timer on my phone for 2 minutes. And the point of this is I'm going to ask you guys to keep track of how many times you get distracted in these 2 minutes. Just keep tally marks during the period. And then we're going to report back to the group and then figure out the goal for this is like keep track of how many times you get distracted, whatever it is, if it's a thought, if it's a bird, if it's a dog coming to say hi. And then I want you guys to share how you pulled your focus back when you did notice that you were distracted.
Distracted from what? Like, is there something we are supposed to be focusing on, or is this 2-minute guided meditation?
It's a 2 minute
Unguided.
meditation.
All right.
It's thinking meditation. Yeah, but just 2 minutes of chill time. You can keep your screens on or turn them off, whatever you feel comfortable with. But for 2 minutes, we're just gonna try not to be distracted.
Hope my coworkers all shut up.
You can note that on the list of things. All right, 2 minutes is starting now. Okay. Let's all come back. And let's see Natasha, do you want to start? How many times did you get distracted?
I'm guessing like 7 times. I noticed that I was getting distracted by needing to track when I was getting distracted. So I tried to like stop doing that.
It's so meta.
And yeah, I think I felt like more focused than I actually might have otherwise, because I had different sounds in the room to focus on. Like I just got my heater going and I have a candle that's making noise, which sounds weird, but it's like crackling. And also I had like my hands in my pockets on this very fluffy sweater and was very much like feeling that. So it was very, very, your typical focusing on sensations that you can feel or hear.
Yeah.
And that kept me less distracted. But what's interesting is what I mostly got distracted on was any physical pain or discomfort I felt, and instantly going into being upset about it. So that was a little eye-opening for me, because I probably do that a lot these days, and something to dive into.
Yeah, definitely. And something to pay attention to even during like a down season, where if that's, I wouldn't consider that like a weakness per se, but definitely something to be aware of, and then figuring out how to either pull your focus back or reframe. And like what a cool way to figure that out,
Yeah.
Like we've got time to work on it, which is great. So
Yeah.
yeah. Ren, do you want to go next?
I also at some point just stopped keeping a tally because I also found that to be distracting. My coworkers did not shut up, and a friend in Florida texted me to let her know her power was back on. So in conclusion, I lost this game.
All good.
If I'd actually wanted to give it my all, I would have needed to like go shut my eyes and do some breath work or something. And
Yeah.
that's just my choices.
Totally. I get that. I think that is really interesting too, though, like like when we go into these like moments of focus and or meditation, like having the space to do it, whether that's like a dark room or sitting on a cushion or having like the dog laying upside down next to you. Like those are things that like I typically like doing. So it's cool to kind of know what works for you. All right, Caitlin, what do you got?
Same thing. I was like counting the things that distracted me, which like pulled my attention to other things that distracted me. But like the thing that was interesting, the things that I thought would distract me, like Ren, to you, I was like, every time my email buzzes, like even while we were on this call, like I have the Zoom like full screen, but I still have my notifications in case like something big for work pops up. And so like those things that I expected to be distracting me didn't, because to your point, I like was like, no, I silenced that. So but I noticed again having that space, I noticed my body more, which again that distracted me. I noticed the little things like the cars outside, which like I wasn't distracted by before. But all that said, so I was like in more of a focus spot, but like the little things piqued my interest more. So like to bring it back, I actually just stared at one point on my wall. And I find when I'm running a lot of the times, I'll do that. Like I'll be like looking at the sunrise, or like I'll look at like a tree like far ahead. And so like that's something that I find is like just like looking at something, staring at it, and like directing my focus to that, and just like literally in my head just saying like focus. So
Yep, that's one of my mantras too, like in running, especially when things get hard, just like focus, 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 or just focus, focus, focus works really well for me. I love that though, because I love that you tied it back into running, because I think running in a lot of ways can be really meditative. And one thing that I do when things get dark during races is I will try to like I focus a lot on the phrase like run the mile you're in, but instead of like just running the mile I'm in, like for a mile at a time, I will think about all of my favorite memories with my niece or all of my favorite memories with my nephew. Like one or the like my two nephews are very different, but like I'll break it up. So if I've got 10 miles to go, basically it's like a running meditation of like loving kindness for 10 people in my life, which is a good way to like help me focus. But as far as this exercise goes, Ren, I also failed. There was a cat fight right out the window that I jumped up and ran out to. So, yeah, there's progress to be made everywhere, I think. But this, I really like this exercise because it sort of just like keys us in a little more into how hard it is to stay focused and how easy it is to get distracted, and kind of like what we need in order to shift from one to the other. So there's no, I guess there's no like winning or losing. It's just like the awareness that you gain can be applied to other aspects of life, which is really neat. So yeah. Does anybody have any questions about any of these things that that we want to like touch on before we go? I feel like I breezed real quick through those first few slides about mental skills and the down season versus the off season, but I also feel like we talked about that so many times that I didn't want to bore you, and those were very text heavy slides. I'm sorry.
No questions. I think again, it's gonna be like personalized and just looking forward to working with you in regards to structuring the down season. So
Yeah, cool. I'm excited. I think the fun thing about down seasons is that we really get to know each other and ourselves in ways that actually is incredibly beneficial for like the next season ahead. So all good things. Cool. All right. Well, that's all I've got in terms of this. So I hope you guys all have a great weekend. And if you have any questions, reach out.